Garrett Gunderson here, coming at you. We've been talking a lot about life insurance. It's amazing how many people watch life insurance videos, but it's because when you think about it, there's so much talk about it. What type of policy? Should it be term or index universal life or whole life? And why are there all these biases from different advisors and financial gurus? And, you know, what does Robert Kiyosaki do versus what would Doug Andrew do? We just did a reaction video on that. So it's hard for me to even say, you know, and with all these different philosophies, like, let's just get into what our philosophy is, you and I.
Yeah.
Like, because it's pretty much aligned. And, you know, I do whole life.
Yeah. Ditto.
At least 27, now going to be 28. Whole life. People are like, why would you do so many policies? Well, my first one was at 19 years old at $50 a month.
Okay.
I started to make a little bit more money.
Yep.
So I got another policy. I got married, so another policy. We had kids, so more policies. Business partners, so more policies. So it's like there's a lot of that that came along.
Yeah.
You know, and interestingly, if you look at my portfolio, some of them I minimum funded.
Mm-hmm. Really?
They were totally
just
safe.
Full base policies?
Yeah, because when I first started, that $50 a month policy
was a stretch.
It was just like it was a start.
Yep.
My second policy was $100 base, I think $162 of overfunding, because I specifically using it to buy out a lease of a car 39 months after I started my policy.
Okay.
Which was a kind of a cool strategy because I bought an Acura that was a brand new, but the new Acuras had come out. And so they were leasing the cars still on the lot from the previous year for $550, but to purchase one was $800 some dollars.
Okay.
So I just took the difference.
Took the gap.
Yeah, I took the gap.
Created your own little arbitrage situation.
And then I just bought out the residual.
Yep.
And then made the full payment back to the policy to get the cash value back built up.
Cool.
So that was kind of like a strategy.
That's awesome.
And then I really started to, you know, understand the value of a death benefit. But most importantly, I don't look at like my life insurance as an investment. I look at it as a savings account with tons of benefits.
Totally.
I look at it as my alternative to bonds that gives me a better deal. And I look at it as a storage unit that I could then use to capitalize on investments. But I make sure those investments are like, I don't do it a lot. I mean, I have, okay, because I bought a business.
Sure.
I bought real estate.
Yep.
I paid for remnant rate, which is when you do a book.
Okay.
You can buy ads at a certain point at a deep discount because it's cheaper to buy the ads when you buy it early in advance.
Okay.
Essentially.
Are those on Amazon?
So
ads on Amazon?
No, those are like full page ads in New York Times, Wall Street Journal.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I used it to pay off a high interest rate Amex when I had a cash crunch in 2008.
Yeah.
I used it to build a TV studio. So I have used it, but to me, it really has to generate a really high return. Like right now, I just took a loan yesterday because I'm with a co-publisher for my new book.
Yeah.
So I pay for all the books up front, which is about $150,000 to print them.
Okay.
So I just use my cash value to do that.
Sure.
So that's an example.
That's awesome.
So I'm not like the guy that's like, oh yeah, you buy your groceries with it and you put 100% of your income into it. I'm like, I put 18% of my income into it. And if there's no good investments or there's investments that would take too much of my time, I just let it ride in the policy. And right now I bought some land and a small cabin that we're turning a music studio with my cash value. Because I told the guy I could close in 5 days, which I did.
So you won.
And and this one I bought in 9 days. Craziest story because they weren't wiring into my account, so they had to send it overnight. And there was a storm on the East Coast.
Oh no!
The planes didn't get out. When they finally got in, there was a mechanical issue. They had to land at a different airport.
Oh.
So when it finally got here, and I went to deposit the check, and there was a hold on the check because of my banking institution.
Sure.
It took me 10 days to close, not 9. But the woman still went with it. Like I was out of contract for 24 hours.
Breach of contract for 24 hours. Yeah.
So I was a little nervous about it, but it gave me a leg up of 2 other people that were coming in to do this. But like for 5 years, I didn't touch that cash value.
Right.
I was building Wealth Factory.
Yep.
We were growing fast. And things were going really well. And so there just was like, I didn't have time for other investments.
Yeah.
And I had already done a bunch of real estate. I was done with that game.
Yeah.
So I just like that if I would have left that money in a savings account during most of those years, it would have made less than 1%.
Totally.
And because I was using overfunding in most of my policies using PUA, I was getting much better returns after a few years. The first few years I was behind, but better returns in my cash value.
Yeah.
So now I have less than 1 month in any bank account of my expenses.
Less than a month.
Yeah. Just, I want to handle 4 weeks. So
Okay.
it's like,
4
I guess in
about a month.
February,
About
that's
a
a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just because I don't feel really comfortable, especially with regional banks. I mean, and I don't really want to switch to Chase, but like that would be a bank I would be like, they're too important to our economy.
Yeah.
If they went under,
That's what
everything's in trouble.
unfortunately. Yeah.
But I like to store a lot of my cash in my cash values.
Yeah.
And so what I like is I have some waiver of premium. So if I became disabled, the payments would still go in.
Yep.
I've got
But not on every policy.
Not on every policy.
Right. Exactly.
I've got accelerated benefit riders. So I could tap into the death benefit if I had some things happen in the future, which I'm hoping means I don't have to buy long-term care insurance.
So you have some companies that have better living benefits than others. So you have some
I have
of those you can
liability
tap into.
protection because I'm in the state of Utah for all my policies. So, and the Utah Guarantee Life Association has never paid out $1 for the $300,000 that they insure, where the FDIC, in 3 bank failures this year, paid out $36 billion of the $123 billion they have available. 3 bank failures.
They just paid 20% almost of their.
And you know, they didn't even come close to covering the 2008 debacle because an extra $5.5 trillion came in outside of FDIC through TARP and all that kind of stuff. So, so I like that.
Out.
I like that the cash value is available along the way. There's tax benefits as it grows. I can take withdrawals and I could take loans. I have a choice in that matter.
Yeah.
And so, that's why I do whole life. Now, is there potentially better returns? Yes, but not in a savings account with all these benefits.
Well, and that's just talking about the function and the difference between saving and investing. And I think people just need to understand that difference. And I think that's one of the biggest, breaks in our financial system is the miseducation about people thinking they're saving for retirement, saving for whatever when they're really investing. And, you know, that just, I do a talk, it's called the Life 180 Pyramid talk, and it's all about how do you build a pyramid. You build it from
How do you build a pyramid scheme?
Yeah, exactly.
You do 7702 quota 8 times and say
double
you gotta
your
get
money
the
like
IUL,
Doug Andrew,
get 100% arbitrage. Like, sorry, this is a video we recently watched.
We just filmed that
talking about 100% returns. I'm like, whoa, who is not running fast from someone who's claiming 100% returns?
Exactly. Like it's anybody that believes that, I'm sorry, but it's like buyer beware. Like if you buy that story, I got news for you. Like
temporarily in obscure markets, you can make 100%.
Sure.
For temporary times. Like even in business, you can make 100%, but eventually you hit a saturation point in the market or the economy changes. Or what happens when you have really high returns like that in a business, competition comes in.
Right.
Because they go, these margins are too good. I'm coming in. And then all of a sudden that competition lowers the margin and there's a competitive nature of price. So like there's nothing logically in the world. Like, look, I had these guys back in the day that I rented radio time from. Nice. And they had this thing that they'd said they called equity milling. And
equity milling.
Yeah, equity milling.
That sounds like a lawsuit waiting.
They would buy real estate and then get a straw buyer to come in and refinance it and then pay them versus the bank and pull all the equity out with the higher price. And they were paying 60% on hard money loans for these acquisitions.
What?
So they'd come in and they'd say, hey, we'll pay you 5% a month. And then those people that were getting 5% a month would raise funds by saying, I'll pay you 2 or 3% a month to other people. And then they would keep the spread. And
what do you say,
the guy in charge is in jail.
Ponzi scheme?
The guy in charge is in jail.
Yeah.
And honestly, was ridiculously articulate, ridiculously smart. I went to events that he hosted. Fortunately, I never invested in his funds.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I never set up one. But I didn't get unscathed in this because there was another guy doing a fund paying 12%, which because of the contrast of 60, I was like, well, this is logical. He's like, I'm going to buy apartment complexes, convert them to condos through just a little bit of construction and then sell them. And 30% of the people there say they want to buy them. And I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then that fund eventually went under. I lost money. Some of my clients lost money. The only good news is I never got paid anything on anyone that did that business because I wasn't in that business of making commissions on it. Yeah. But ultimately, this notion of what people think are really good returns comes with a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And can often lose. We saw this pre-2008 where everyone was like, all you got to do is buy real estate. And look, I'm just, again, another guilty admission here. In Vegas, you used to have to get into a lottery to even buy property because the demand was so high. So I bought a property and then later on sold that property for much less than I paid for it.
Yep.
And it was simply because everyone was like, God's not making more land. I'm like, well, have you never heard of volcano?
Exactly.
And you know, all this stuff where there's certain dry climates where there's, you know, where, so anyway, like the bottom line is a lot of times we get seduced into these attractive returns. Crypto.
I was just going to say, I lost. So I'll give an admission.
This is like confessions.
Confessions of like bad investments. I had 7 Bitcoin in 2017, end of 2016 through the beginning of mid 2017. And I had them and I got convinced to put them into a mining operation. That was going to
mine Bitcoin.
That was going to pay me like 10% per month.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like
yield farming or whatever it was.
Yep. And I looked at it and I did it. And before you knew it, boom, all 7 Bitcoin were up and gone. And the guy ran away with them.
I'm thinking about 7 Bitcoin's not bad today.
I could think of some things to do with 7 Bitcoin.
I know someone that had 90,000 Bitcoin.
Shut your mouth.
And sold it for 8 cents each in the early days.
That's so gross. That's so gross.
I feel I feel for him, man.
I mean, but like, yeah.
He's like, there was no, back then there was no chance. He just mined them and, you know, whatever the money was.
It's nuts. But I mean, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's real estate. It doesn't matter if it's stocks or you're trading options. We've talked about that today. It doesn't matter if you're doing crypto. Like, none of that is bad if you are really an expert at options. If you're really an expert at real estate. If it's your investor DNA. None of that is bad. The problem is people get it out of order in what they do in the order of operations.
So I like the thought of having, you know, people say, this is a weird statement. Have 3 to 6 months of expenses. Was it 3 or 6?
What do you say?
I think your minimum is 9.
Okay.
I say 6 to not intimidate people. And then when they make the progress, I'm like, but ultimately in cash value, I want 2 years.
Okay. That's my number 2.
But the thing is, let's build up to that.
Yeah.
Because if there's people living paycheck to paycheck.
That's just too much.
And I'm like, 2 years. They're like, you're a dick. You know what? Then I become Susie Orman. I remember during COVID, I turned on the TV and Susie Orman was in her Bahamas home during COVID saying, I told you should save money and you didn't save money. I'm like, this isn't helping anyone, Suze. You know, I'm like, the told you so isn't a great thing here. So this becomes a place to store some cash.
Yeah.
And I can have longevity with it. And even it's crazy because 2 years seems low in this inflationary environment to a large degree.
Let's talk a little bit before we get into some of like the technicals of whole life.
Yeah.
Because I know we want to get into that and it'll be a 2-hour video.
So I want to go to sleep tonight.
Like, you know, tonight.
Yeah.
But for everybody watching, we've been filming today, like literally straight, like 8 hours.
Yeah.
So, but here's the deal. I want to know for you, like when you say 2 years, I know why I say 2 years. I'm curious to like, what is the reasoning behind 2 years for you inside of cash value?
Several reasons. The first reason is when worst case scenario happens, it's much worse than people think.
Yeah.
So like, I remember, you know, talking to people about doing hard money lending and having first position and like how, you know, worst case scenario, then take over the property. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a first position and someone else was committed to first position and we had to go against each other. Mm-hmm. And I just pulled them aside before when I'm like, hey, you got screwed. I got screwed. We're both promised this. Both like the filings were messed up and neither of us have something other than all the communications. Oh. Why don't we just team up and get what we can? Mm-hmm. But who would have thought?
Right.
Right. Like, and the other thing is if someone has a health issue, that could be a long-term thing. Mm-hmm. If someone just chooses to switch careers, that could be a big issue.
Yeah.
And so you want staying power beyond like 6 months is a really short runway for a major change or a major catastrophe. So like, let's say your spouse is sick.
Yeah.
So 6 months and you're going to go back to work?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
it's a lot.
I think 3 to 6 months is said because people are just struggling right now. I just read a Yahoo Finance article for a video I did where in that article it said 64% of people in America are living paycheck to paycheck. And then it went through the 5 things that most of them have a ding on their credit because of a late payment. Most of them couldn't come up with a certain amount of money within 20. It was pretty alarming.
$2,000.
So when you tell them, like, hey, this is what you do, like, go F yourself. Like, you know, are you kidding me?
I get that.
But when I'm thinking, I'm doing all I can to automatically save in a certain percentage, and my entire methodology is, how can I pay only what's legally required in tax, where most people tip the government? That helps me bolster that. How can I negotiate the very best interest rates, because all interest rates and loans are negotiable, but most people don't know how to have the right credit score, the right collateral, the right connections to the right institution, or the right cash flow reporting, and therefore they pay more than they need to. And, you know, how do they design their loans properly if they do have loans? And then are there hidden fees or commissions or non-performing fees with investments? That's all money that you can get back. And then how do you remove duplicate coverages or improper structure with insurance? So it can help you get there. Why do you say 2 years?
A lot of similar things. Mine's probably a dumbed down, simplistic version of everything that you just said. I think it ultimately is as complicated and as involved as what you say. But so I had a marketing client before I re-entered the life insurance space, and it was in the executive job search space. And so the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor, has this statistic out that says for every $10,000 you earn, it's going to take you a month to find a job on average. Okay? Think about that.
Dang.
So I would argue that, okay, 3 to 6 months is a good target, especially for the middle income kind of bracket, right? Like that's a good place to be. It gets your emergency fund. It makes it, you're protected. I would argue, like, if you do really get sick that long, having money saved in a whole life policy with the living benefits is going to be there to help you. So that helps kind of like bridge that need. But I would argue the more money you make, the more you actually need saved. You know, that argument is there. But I say 2 years just in general as like a framework, because I just believe I want to be prepared for a year for emergency. You know, I want to, typically speaking, if stuff really hits the fan, it's going to be a really bad year. And I don't want to have to be coming ever from a place of scarcity, right? Like I want to know I'm taken care of, my family's taken care of, my business is taken care of, like we're good, right? And then I also, during that time, I don't want to just focus on survival. I want to focus on opportunity. I always am like coming from the perspective of like, I want to be able to embody that opportunistic investor profile. And so if I have 2 years, I have 1 year for emergency, 1 year for opportunity. And by the way, if stuff hits the fan and, you know, I'm still doing okay and my business is doing well, or like, you know, whatever, now I got 2 years for opportunity. Like, cause that's when you make money when you buy at the right times. And that's the nature of it. So I think you're just setting yourself up for
definitely
success.
the opportunity notion is when there's distress, there's opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so I totally get that. But the number one reason I have it,
Yeah.
it makes my wife feel good.
That's a good reason.
And when she feels good about our finances, she's supportive when I'm like, I want to do comedy.
There you go.
I want to, like, it's like, cool. Well, I know we're stable, so go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just have fun. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's all these different ways, or like beliefs that people think. I think we agree on 2 years, so that's cool. So now let's talk about like, okay, we both believe that whole life insurance is the best place to save that money. Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay. So
for the majority of people,
not everybody,
because some people are in a place where Dave Ramsey's going to give them better advice on the first few steps, because he's got his baby steps thing.
Yeah.
Where he's like, hey, when you're in debt and you're spending more than you make, you need to be relentless about paying that off. And I agree. When you're spending more than you make, I don't really have great solutions.
Yeah.
If you're barely eking by and your student loans are so big, I actually have a few, but the reality is
that's a different video.
Like it's a different video, but ultimately, like if you're a train wreck, you got to get back on track and have a dose of reality. He's pretty good at that. He's a little angry, but he's pretty good at that. So, but if you're someone that's making more than you spend, this is an amazing saving strategy.
Totally.
And it really sets you up for the future. I write a lot about it in What Would the Rockefellers Do?
Yep.
You know, about the benefits to create more cash flow in the future because you have a death benefit that gives you more options and opportunity. You know, like I was on a call right when you got in my truck, and I was talking about charitable trusts and what that could do. But most people, this is the most insane thing I think about insurance. People that sell, buy term and invest the difference, then have this person assume they're not going to be successful enough if they start early enough, which they say is going to be so good for them.
Yeah.
That they're not going to be successful enough to ever be hit with an estate tax. But if you start in your 20s and you're setting aside 10% of your income and it's supposed to do 10% a year, shouldn't you be in a place where estate tax is going to be a problem if that money is in a 401k, an IRA, a simpler SEP, because it's all deferred.
Yeah.
And so when it comes in, it hits the estate. So then what's going to happen is they're going to talk to an attorney because they're more successful now.
Yeah.
And that attorney is going to tell them you have an estate tax problem.
Yep.
Because you didn't plan early enough, because your planner was too busy telling you to just cut back expenses, and attorneys are an expense.
Yep.
And so now they go buy insurance in their 60s.
That's cheap, right?
And maybe with 54% of the United States population having chronic disease and illness,
Probably not insurable.
they are either not insurable or they have to pay extra.
They're rated.
And so they're rated. So now they have to take part of what they supposedly created to just pay for an expense to handle a tax, because people are so tax averse in this country that they'll, so like, that's the strange thing is, if you were so successful at the planning, wouldn't you be creating this problem that you could absolutely have prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how anybody argues with that mindset, like, or that process of just kind of dialing in like the journey of life. And I would argue, like, if you follow like what you need there, with inflation and everything taken into consideration, if you don't have an estate tax problem, you're probably going to be screwed. Like,
right,
not going to be able to maintain your standard of living.
Right. And that's the tough thing, is because inflation has been astronomical.
Yeah.
And we more than doubled the amount of money supply in the last few years, which is like putting twice the amount of water in soup.
Think about it this way. We have like, inflation is like toothpaste. Like, once it comes out, it doesn't go back in, you know, like it doesn't, it's
one way.
It's one way. So like, if I don't know, the rule of 72, right? Like, so the rule of 72 says you divide whatever number, 72
Whatever
divided by that number. So
tells you how long it takes to double.
Right. So most people use it for like a rate of return. How long is it going to take?
10% means 10%. In 7.2 years, my money doubles.
Exactly. But let's use it for inflation, because now if your standard of living right now is $100,000 a year, the Fed's target level of inflation is 2%. So 72 divided by 2 means 26 years from now, it's going to cost you not $100,000 but $200,000 to maintain your standard of living.
Math's not quite right, I don't think. 26?
Or
that's 52.
36.
There you
36.
Go. There we go.
So 36 years. But like, that's that. Now, but here's the deal.
That's our target rate
that's
right now.
Target rate.
It's been 4.2 or 4. Yeah, like
since 1971.
And that's not totally accurate.
Right.
Because what's interesting is when a new technology comes in that didn't exist before, and technology continues to get efficient, it actually looks like the rate of inflation is going down through the efficiency of technology, but it's a brand new expense you didn't even have. And if it's a new technology that now becomes customary, like new features on a vehicle, they don't consider the new feature that raised the price as inflation because they consider it new technology. So that doesn't quite work. So the consumer price index isn't exact because they're keeping government salaries in there. They're keeping, you know, they're I think kind of finagling that,
of course, they are,
to not look so bad.
Otherwise,
if it's like 10%, it feels like, oh my God.
The consumer sentiment,
because that means every
horrible.
7.2 years, you have like, okay, so when I graduated college, and I drove to the place I was living in Salt Lake, gas was 97 cents. That was in the year 2000.
Was it really?
I just gassed up at just under $5.
Okay.
Okay, so we're talking about 2000.
Okay.
To 2023. So if we looked at your index, it should only been $2.
Yeah,
for gas.
That's true.
Right,
Energy
or less.
Costs. Yep.
You know, my electrical bill this last month was $495.
That's it. Come to Arizona.
Oh yeah. So when I think about you know, what I paid in that first apartment.
Yeah.
The apartment was smaller, but it was on the 3rd floor. So all the heat rose.
Yeah.
But it was $113. So like we could go through food. I went last night and I was going to buy this little thing of shrimp. It was $19 for this little thing of shrimp. And I was like, are you kidding? Like I went to buy some pepperoni. Like, I guess I just don't ever do shopping is what I'm figuring out here.
Yeah.
But it's like the numbers are way worse.
So,
you know, why whole life is because my death benefit can help me battle inflation.
Yep.
Now the cash value is being hurt by inflation.
sure.
But
Although,
in a time where there might be really high interest rates, let's say interest rates went to 10% and I could put my money, I could pull my cash value out, earn the 10%. And then when interest rates go down, cash value crushed savings accounts and money markets for the last decade.
you want to talk guaranteed positive arbitrage. I don't usually go here. And it's not something I would, you know,
it's not your main selling point.
Thinking about, but certainly there are scenarios where it happens. And, you know, one of the things that we were doing at one point in time, once again, I always talk about whole life just giving you control and options, right? Like you could get lines of credit, cash value lines of credit, assigning your whole life cash value and getting a bank line of credit for 2% and earning 4, 5 net on everything for a mature policy, right? So that's positive arbitrage. The max loan rate you're ever going to pay in a whole life policy is 8%. Which I mean, dude, 2 years ago, right? People were like,
"That's crazy,
that's insane, that's never gonna happen." Now people are like, "That's
you
a
saw
mortgage
the minutes.
rate."
The minutes just came out for the Fed, and the stock market dropped because they're talking about raising them again.
Of course, and they're going to. And so here's the thing, though, like when we look at
you've got the arsonist running the fire department with that whole thing. By the way,
it's a nightmare. I mean, what does everybody expect? I'm like,
we created inflation. Now we're going to slow it down by raising interest rates to make it painful for everybody with any loan or needing a loan to live.
Anybody that doesn't see that coming is, I mean, anyway, that's a whole.
It took a lot longer than I thought. A lot longer. Like I thought 10 years ago.
I thought it was going to be 2014, 2015.
It's crazy. It did.
Yeah. I mean, so I mean, at the end of the day, I look at this stuff and there it's control, it's options. I mean, if you try to get a loan for a second home right now or like an investment property, you're paying more than 8%. So now what looked like before, and by the way, you're not paying 8% in a whole life policy right now. You're paying like maybe 5.5%, 5.75%.
I have one at 4.6, I think, with One America I just took.
Yep.
Isn't that what it is?
One America is like one of the best loan rates
so I just
right
got that one just because of some things that I'm doing with my book.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so like you look at that, do you know the value of a 4.6 loan that you can use for whatever how much would you pay a bank right now if you said, hey, I've got my book thing and I need a loan rate? They're going to say 12%.
Yeah, for a book.
At least.
It's not collateral they care about.
They don't care.
Right.
So like to be able to have access, how much value is there in that for you?
I mean, one, the fact that it only takes me filling out a form.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I filled it out wrong.
Nice. Way to go.
I had my wife sign it instead of me, but
she didn't sign your name?
It's all owned through an asset protection trust that I'm the main person.
Yeah.
So, and it's just an electronic signature. So it's just, but still, I mean, and it'll come to me in about 5 days. So that's pretty sweet.
That's amazing. And so, okay. So now let's talk about, we want to get 2 years ultimately. If you got to start with 3 to 6 months just to keep your head from exploding.
Restructuring loans.
Yep.
Reallocating funds, low interest that you're earning, pay off high interest rate loans. That's going to improve things. Renegotiate, right? Save on tax. If you're getting money back from the government, you just give them an interest-free loan. Change your exemptions.
Totally.
Look at my tax framework videos that show like all these different ways to save. Like the person I was on the phone with today, you know, we were well into the 6 figures in 40 minutes. I mean, with straightforward black and white strategies that their accountant was just too busy because they're too busy filing because they have such a high demand and they don't have time to strategize. So ultimately,
and she was giddy about that.
Oh, it was fun. We had fun. We were telling jokes. We were laughing. It was great.
I was there listening.
That's not what you know. And I told her, I was like, hey,
she knew.
Okay?
She knew I was listening, and we had fun with it. Yeah, it was great.
I had a good friend that was talking to me on the phone last night on speaker, and my wife heard what he was saying, and he's like, "Wait, your wife just heard that?" I'm like, "You sound like me. It's fine." So yeah, I mean, basically, there's ways to get to that number.
Yeah.
You just have to have a little bit of financial savvy and maybe a little bit of time because look, I've been in a place where 2008. I wasn't making ends meet. I was going backwards. It was super hard. It was, stressful. Like, I get that. But if you can just start somewhere, progress over perfection, done is better than perfect. Just get going. Like, I remember in 2008, I was like, every dollar I don't pay towards this credit card that I'm using to make ends meet is costing me 20% But it was like, I need to be in the habit of saving, even though that's the case. And I just looked at the difference between what I was earning in my cash value as I made the deposit, what I was paying in the credit card as insurance, because I wanted to have control. Because I had a good friend saying, look, man, I went bankrupt because I didn't keep saving during that time. And, I made it through a really tough time. It wasn't just a tough time for me. People got their butts kicked in 2008.
Most people got their butts kicked.
And I was able to make it to the other side.
Yep.
With a few scars, but without bankruptcy. So,
exactly.
So, like, my whole life has been my never fail me strategy.
Right.
It's been my great place where I store cash, where I don't lose sleep over it, where once the dividend's paid, it's guaranteed, where it's protected from liability and bankruptcy, and the death benefit's going to be there in the future. So I can utilize it to be more charitable. I can utilize it to spend other assets and then have it replaced to my trust in the Rockefeller method kind of way. So that's all I have to say about it. What, you got any final sentiments about it?
I think when you're looking at a policy, I just did a video on this the other day about like 6 things to consider as you're like looking to pick a policy for yourself, right? Because I think you need to. I don't know if I'll remember all 6 off the top of my head, but like ultimately that
was a Doug Andrew move.
Exactly.
I got a video on this. I got a video on this. I got a video on this.
I know, right?
Check out the video on this.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, but it's like, it's not all about just what is the dividend rate. Because I think a lot of people in whole life just focus on what's the dividend rate and what does the illustration look like. Because at the end of the day, if you plan on utilizing this policy, the illustration is not going to matter. The dividend's going to change. It's probably going to go up at this point in time, which is really cool. We've been living in this 40-year environment, 45-year environment,
and really low,
where current illustrations have performed better, or illustrations have performed worse than actually like what you thought you bought. And if you didn't work with somebody who knew what was going on, that's why the industry got a bad rap from a lot of people, because they just don't understand what they don't know. But now I think there's a potential policies can perform better, which is pretty cool, because as dividends go up, current assumptions will improve, and it'll be better. But I think you got to look at the dividend rate. You got to look at the loan rates. You got to think about paid up additions. Yeah. What are the flexibility? Can you overfund it? And what is the flexibility of the paid up additions? That's like,
can you pay a minimum 1 year and then pay more the next year?
Can you make up for paid up additions missed
That's really nice
year?
without having to go through underwriting?
Without going through like all that stuff, right? People don't realize the value of that kind of stuff, and they don't realize how flexible whole life can be, but
it has to be designed.
It has to be with the right company, and you got to make sure.
They got to be at least 100 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Always have paid dividends worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
But even then, like that's the foundation.
Mutual company versus stock is my preference.
Yep, 100. Like always, that's not even negotiable.
But I don't really care about direct versus non-direct as much. I know a lot of people get in the weeds of that, which is how your dividend crediting rate is when you borrow.
I don't either. I care about, and because the direct versus non-direct, I talked about this. Direct recognition companies do better when interest rates are going up, and non-direct do better when interest rates are going down. And guess what? If you're buying this from a long-term perspective, have one of each.
Yeah, because I got One America, Guardian, Mass, Penn.
So you got all of it. And so like, and utilize them differently at different times. It just gives you options, right? Sweet. Like you'll have both. But the bottom line is like, the biggest thing to me is the flexibility of the paid up additions and making sure that as a whole, that the policy is designed to meet your needs. My biggest thing, and I'll end with this unless you have something, like, is the people that swear that 1090 policies, 10% base, 90% PUAs are the only way to go because it gives you the most liquidity year one. That is so short-term thinking. Because
what about the death benefit?
What about the death benefit? What about the living benefits?
Right.
Like your living benefits are based on the death benefit, based on your dividends are based on the base premium.
Think of this as a macro asset, not just as a banking asset.
Right. You have to think about it as what problems is it going to solve for you throughout your entire life?
Yep.
Not how much liquidity am I going to have this year?
All right.
In year one. So
perfect. Well, You heard it here. If you like this, there's other videos like this where we dive in and pick things apart and share them with you. And ask your questions. What would Garrett do? You can go to GarrettGunderson.com, WWGD /WWGD, and I'll answer questions on video or comment, and I'd like to respond. Tell me I'm a jack. I've got a lot of hair tips. Like I had some split ends, so I went and got a haircut because I hadn't cut it for a while. I learned I need to put some oils in my hair because it just did. So like, thank you. I mean, I don't know these things unless my wife tells me or my viewers. So I appreciate that. And some people say stuff like, God bless you. Hope it goes well. I like, hey, and some people say things that should be hurtful, but entertain me. So go ahead, say what you're going to say. I can handle it. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from. So go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.